Hello and welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most reflected work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we're coming at you live at our regular time on the Discord. Huzzah!
Huzzah.
Now,
This is coming out a bit late because our schedule's a mess right now. And I do want to just bring that up because we're recording our next episode early to make up for this one being late. That makes sense if you really think about it.
Yep.
Check there's the Doof Media calendar. If you're on our Discord, there's calendar events for all that. So I think it's exactly 24 hours early, but that's before Ruben and I are going away for a little bit. If you are someone who follows us live, definitely check that out.
Yeah. And hey, while you're checking things out, you can check out this page, doofmedia.com/contribute. We're in the middle of the countdown to the comet right now, and so you can head there to contribute to, stuff for the live stream. I'll get back to that in a second, but I realize I say this countdown to the comet thing a fair amount, and it really reflects on how much of an impact
Avatar
had on my life.
I was literally thinking that as you said it just then. I was thinking, man, Ruben really loves Avatar.
But was it as big? Was the countdown to the comet a thing that you were that you lived, Elliot? Was that part of your lived experience when you were? I want to say 17.
No, I discovered Avatar well after it finished.
Yeah.
I just binged it all.
No, because I got into it between season 2 and 3, in the hiatus before season 3 came out or something like that. And I watched it and it was great. And then watching it live and having the countdown to the comet live, it really was very hype. Well, not on Nickelodeon. I don't remember what channel it was on. I guess it would have been on cable here or whatever.
Yeah, Foxtel. Nickelodeon was a channel on Foxtel, wasn't it?
Yes.
Because we only ever got that when we went to hotels on trips. My parents would get so mad because we didn't have cable at home, but we'd stay in hotels or resorts or whatever that would have cable, and so we'd go to the beach for a long weekend.
Yeah,
and my sisters and I would just spend the whole time indoors because it was our chance to binge Nickelodeon. We'd watch 2 whole seasons of Danny Phantom, and it was awesome.
I actually am pretty sure that's where I watched the finale of Avatar in a hotel. And what they were doing was they were doing the countdown to the comet you're approaching the final episodes of Avatar. They were just replaying the entire show. And so I guess I must have just binged a bunch of season 3 on TV. Anyway, Avatar, it's a good show. And you know what? They're making more stuff. It's not even over yet. So yeah, I guess thumbs up to that. But
and I'm still, I think, the one person who's excited for the live action one hitting Netflix soon. I can't wait for that.
I didn't tell you this, but I saw I started reading an Avatar fanfic that was what if effectively Aang had woken up in the Fire Nation and kind of the Water Tribe was the one who had kind of attacked and wiped out the air nomads. And so Sokka was kind of Zuko, Katara was the Azula, and then Aang wakes up near the Crescent Moon Island and is kind of met by Zuko and Azula, and it's kind of he remembers his previous, he remembers the canon events, but he kind of lives it out again with Zuko and Azula as his companions. It was pretty fun. I don't know, it was fun.
It sounds like a good episode of a sci-fi show that does alternate realities.
Yeah, it's the what if of Avatar, which is funny. But enough Avatar chat, Elliot. What we're really here to talk about is our upcoming live stream, APU2, all packed up to, all paled up beyond the pale. I forget for a little bit what it's called. But yeah, we've got a bunch of segments that we've announced. We're doing fan art awards. We're doing item. What do you even call it? Diagnostics. Yeah, and we've also announced that we're going to have a best meme segment where people submit all their favorite Otherverse themed memes, and we look through them all and crown one the best meme of all time. It might even be one from our own Twitter. You never know.
I doubt it. Have you seen our memes, Ruben?
Yeah, no, I know. If you have a meme, but we do one every single day, so there's a lot in there,
Oh yeah, true.
I was going to say, if you have a meme that you think is the best Otherverse meme, you can head to duffmedia.com/contribute. Links to contribute to all of these segments that we've mentioned are on there. But yeah, submit your best meme. And
And to
you,
be clear, it doesn't have to be one that you're making or you're
no,
making for
yes.
this. It's just any Otherverse meme that you like. I mean, obviously, please give credit if you're submitting somebody else's meme and like you know where it came from.
Well, yeah, the form is a
Include that.
link submit, like you put in a
Yeah,
link. So linking to the post or whatever is good, I think.
yeah, but like it doesn't have to be yours. We're kind of looking for just nominations for the best meme.
Yeah. So we've been talking for 6 minutes and we have not yet mentioned that we're talking about Loose Ends E3, the third epilogue, Verona's epilogue. And yeah, it's a fun one. Although, not as fun as last week's because Lucy's the best and last week's epilogue was actually so big. But Verona, does her best to have a good epilogue.
I can't believe, because okay, like that. What's crazy to me is you use the term "fun," and like this is that chapter was really good and really important, but I wouldn't have used the word "fun" to describe last week's chapter.
Well, I would. You and I
Okay,
have different tastes, I guess.
I yeah, okay. To each their own on that front, I guess.
Hmm.
But yeah, um, like no, this I really enjoyed this epilogue because it was like those first two were quite heavy, like they were cathartic
Yeah.
and they had good endings and like they were important. Like obviously, I probably would have been leading the pack on trying to find out where Wildbow lived to do a misery on him if we hadn't got the Jasmine Lucy conversation.
Great.
But like those two were still pretty like emotionally raw and rough epilogues, and this is the
Yes.
first one where I was just kind of like this was the epilogue that was the first one that felt kind of like, oh yeah, we won and things are
Yeah.
good now.
Yeah, it does feel like we're getting. My impression of this epilogue is it's a picture of kind of what business as usual looks like for the Kennetiers now, and that's really nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's yeah, there's a lot to talk about there, I think. But yeah, like this is sort of I think yeah, the first of the epilogues that's a bit like, oh yeah, we're it's not easy, like it's not happily ever after, but like we're okay now, kind of.
yeah. But yeah, so the content of this epilogue is the trio starting by planning to kick off a big ritual. Avery is kind of guessing her way through what they have planned. It's quite funny that
Yeah.
Verona is making Avery play this magical guessing game. Like, it makes sense. Yes, Avery is doing this so that Avery can confirm that what they're doing makes sense and kind of sense check it and see if there are any other better ideas, which, yes, is funny, but it's just very Verona to make her guess all these things. I don't know.
No, I agree. Like it's exactly what you said. There are some legit reasons to do with like validating it, like and like
Yeah.
those get brought up, and it's like yes, that's true. But also, that Verona is loving the fact that she gets to turn this into like a pop quiz discussion on practice at large rather than just a lecture on what she already has planned.
Yeah, it's
Um,
very much up her alley to do that, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean that's also one of those little growth moments. Like this is a Verona epilogue, and Verona almost gets a bit lost in it at times for me. But like
Mm.
this was one of those little Verona moments where it was like, oh wow, we've come a long way from the Verona who like was permanently offended by the bubblegum and duct tape comment to now she's like, hey, here's my idea, tear it to shreds. Like that, there's that like internal confidence in her abilities now that means she can actually take on criticism, um, and is sort of actively seeking it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. She's finally embracing the, bubblegum and twigs part of herself.
Yeah, yeah,
She's
exactly.
accepted it.
And I love how we get like dumped into this conversation kind of halfway as well. Like it takes a while for us to figure out exactly what parts of the ritual they're talking about. Like we start to, it's like we learn that there's pillars that they're talking about the edge or whatever, but then it takes a little bit for the full picture to form. And I think that adds to this sense of like, I think we as readers are encouraged to try and play along with Avery. Like I was
Yeah,
definitely as
yeah.
I was reading trying to be like, oh, are we thinking? And then like as it's defined that these are the pillars, I was already immediately like, sort of sitting there thinking, okay, well, what are we going to do for like the coin? Well, that has to be the
Mm,
markets and like, you know,
mm.
um, I guess as we're talking about like growth moments for the Kenneteers, obviously this chapter shows us how much they've grown as practitioners that they can pull off this ritual or whatever. But I also thought it was fun. It kind of gave us the chance to show how we as readers have grown as practitioners by getting to play along here.
Yeah, that's a really fun call out. It's like a little bit of check your knowledge. Could you be a Kenneteer? Are you smarter than a fifth grader kind of vibe?
Yeah, and I mean the answer in this case is no, because these three particular fifth graders are fucking bonkers.
Yeah.
They're the smartest kids around.
Well, that was the thing
But
about Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader is those kids were smart. I mean, they didn't just have. I was a dumb fifth grader. I wouldn't have been able to do well on that show, you know?
well, and also like my memory, I only watched like one or two episodes. That was another Grant Denyer show, wasn't it? I fucking hate that guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, but like it was all from what I saw, like really rote, learny stuff. Like it was like, are you smarter than a fifth grader? But like, I don't think smartness is like familiarity with niche aspects of a fifth grader's curriculum.
Well,
You know what I
it
mean?
was
Like,
Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader brackets at answering fifth grade curriculum questions.
yeah, but like
Which,
they specifically, in my opinion, like were skewing less towards it wasn't like fifth grade math where it's like, yes, both like adults and fifth graders should know what 6 times 12 is or something.
Yeah.
It was like, or not even like what's the capital of so and so for geography. It'd be like some niche part of the geography that like you just don't need in real life, and it's kind of like
yeah.
bringing to my mind. I'm like, why is the curriculum including this for fifth graders? You know. Like,
Yeah, the curriculum should be including a lot more magic. I think we can all agree.
yeah. But yeah, no, I had a lot of fun playing around, like, or playing along with this game for. I actually ended up, and those who are in our Discord might have seen it. Like, I made a map of the ritual as it kind of all came together. Like, I was having a lot of fun playing along, and I just like as we get leading into talking about like what this ritual means for Kennet and all the symbolism there. I just thought it was really fun how much this chapter works in the growth of the Kenneteers as practitioners alongside their growth as people. Yeah. But it's worth talking about those like moments where the Kenneteers as people, like, because this chapter is also chock a block full of just like nice Kenneteers hanging out moments, which we haven't had for a very long time. It feels like Verona and Lucy pretending to be an other.
Yeah, they're just kind of goofing around a bit, which is really nice, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, and I love the bit like Verona is teasing Avery about Nora, and then like Lucy kind of steps in and is like, "Hey, this is cool, right?" And Avery's like, "Yeah," and then they
and
both
Verona
lump in
is
on
even
it,
like, "I can back off if you want," and Avery's like, "No, it's fine. It's like fun
yeah,
teasing. It's very
like
sweet of them."
yeah, it's great. And then there's that genuine moment to follow it up where like Verona does sort of stop for a second. She's like, "Hey, I do need to say something." It's like, "You're such an awesome person that like if you betrayed me, I would be like, oh no, something's wrong with Avery. I wouldn't assume that's you." And it's this real nice, sweet, genuine moment, which is extremely painful for Verona to live through. And I get that energy a lot. But like, yeah, like it's just this chapter just has a bunch of these moments, particularly at the start here, where it's just we're back to those good old days where the Kenneteers are so tight that they can't just talk about work. Like their friendship leaks into it, and like any conversation about work gets derailed a little bit while they talk about something fucking stupid. And then they kind of get back on topic.
Yeah, it's very fun, isn't it, for the Kenneteers to just have this vibe.
Yeah, I missed it. Like this was really prominent in some of the early story stuff, and it's great to see it. Yeah, now that we're all back together.
I think something very funny that I caught on a reread was Avery's kind of mentioning that the rebar doesn't have an edge and it's meant to be an edged object. And Verona's like, "Oh, yeah, that's fine. And then later on, it turns out Verona's like stitched a sword to the rebar to give it an edge. And it's like this kind of half baked thing that she did to try and fix it. And it was just funny rereading this and being like, oh, Avery was like bang on the mark and really got in Verona's head on this one.
Well, I think it's like because like Verona actually responds. Like Verona is a bit like, I don't want to commit to what my plan is because if I can say I will do it and then I can't, I'll be gainsaid, which adds a whole lot of problems to this. And then we find out, like, yeah, what she ended up having to do was her shitty backup plan that she doesn't really like because the first one did not work out. She was like, I'm going to transmute this into a sword. And then she was like, actually, no, I can't do that, which I think was the right call because, like, the rebar is fucking scary, obviously. But yeah, like I'm curious, how do you? My understanding of stitching is that means like sewing something in, right?
Mm, mm.
You can't stitch into a railroad spike, right? Like,
Well, but
am
she's
I?
not. It's not stitching it. She's stitching a shadow of a sword into a railroad spike. Of course, you can't stitch those two things together in the real world, Elliot. It's
I
magic, mate. What did you think?
okay, yeah, no, I know. I'm just like, but what magic? Like, this is one of those things where I'm like, I know, like,
Stitching magic. I don't know. That's a type of magic.
not one we've seen before.
Oh, come on. If you can do spirit surgery, you can stitch things
No,
together
of
with
course. I'm sorry.
magic.
I'm not criticizing that this is possible. Obviously, it is.
Okay.
This is the other verse. I'm just saying it's just
Yeah.
it's so funny the delivery on that where she's just like, I just stitched the shadow of a sword to the rebar, and like the text doesn't draw attention to the fact that that's a fucking wild statement. Like,
I don't know. It doesn't seem that much crazier than some of the other stuff we've seen.
I mean, yeah, but there's usually all set up. Like, and I'm not saying this doesn't feel like it's a completely. It's just like it's just funny that we're at the stage where the story could just be like, yeah, I stitched a shadow to a piece of metal, and like most of the audience is apparently just like, oh yeah, sure, like that. The fact that it's such a ludicrous statement that doesn't stand out is almost the point that I'm making.
Yeah, sure, sure. Okay, all right, that's fair.
People are
I
saying
get
it
you.
has Peter Pan vibes.
Yeah.
He
Well,
he has
Peter
a
Pan's
shadow.
no, his shadow escaped. That was one of
Yeah.
the inciting incidents in Peter Pan was the shadow got away, and I think they ended up stitching it back together.
Oh.
Stitching him back to his shadow at some point.
Oh, okay. I'm vaguely remembering that. Okay,
Hmm, hmm,
sure.
hmm.
Okay, so sure, Peter Pan magic. Well, just say that, and you know, yeah. Okay, I
What do you
guess
think Peter
point.
Pan would be in the other verse?
I mean, fairy's definitely a candidate.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, like, but maybe fairy with a Y, because there's definitely there's a
Well,
whole pocket realm vibe to Neverland. I
yeah,
think.
but he does steal children effectively, right? Like
Yeah, which is big.
steals
That's
children,
big
takes them to the pocket
fairy.
realm. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, like very, very Thea's origin story type stuff,
Mm,
if you ask me.
mm,
Um,
yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
VV says glamour drowned, which I think really makes a lot of sense. But then what
yeah,
would Captain
yeah.
Hook be? That's the real question. Maybe just a different type of Fae, kind of engaged in
Yeah,
this kind of story with him. I could see it. It's
yeah,
actually
yeah.
kind of a bit of a Guillermo Marisica vibe, isn't it? Yeah. Um,
um, but
what
yeah.
were we
Sorry, I
talking
also
about?
I just wanted to talk. What I thought was really funny as well is like it doesn't really get named, but the first pill, like this chapter opens with them talking about like the pillar of like war, like the edge, and it's not really named for a while. And I just thought it was funny that like obviously this story was about fighting the Carmine. Like the idea of fighting against war is woven into the concept of pale. And so I think it's really funny that this epilogue kind of opens talking about the Pillar of War, but kind of refusing to name it at first. And then also it's the pillar that gets placed like the furthest outside of Kennet. Like it's like, I don't know, there's nothing too big I have to say here, but it's just a nice little bit of imagery. I think that like war is kind of placed out to the side and the focus, but also not really at the end of the story here.
Mm, yeah, yeah. That's good. I mean, I'm glad Lucy doesn't obsess over it.
Also, I think I must have skipped it somewhere else in the notes. I just want to call it. I think it's so funny that they're like, yeah, this is we finally didn't have a time pressure. We can do a big ritual on completely on our own terms. And they did it in like less than a month. Like
Mm.
it's still January. Like I just think
Yeah, but
that's
it's
so
not like
funny.
they were
Like
going to take years. I don't know.
I don't maybe it's because I work in the embodiment of bureaucracy, like can it found style. But like we just spent 3 months picking a new name for my team, like it's just so funny to me that like this town is so agile that it's just like on their own time it's less than a month to put together this huge ritual.
Yeah, you're right. It is pretty quick. Mm. Um, but yeah, so Avery starts getting which item maps to which pillar. She gets most of them pretty quickly. Hey, the moon. That's crazy. They're just being like, yeah, we'll use the moon in our ritual. It can be a part of it. I mean, it like makes sense, of course, but it's just like crazy Verona shit.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's that like crazy Verona confidence where it's sort of like, hey, the moon has had a lot of imagery tied into our town and stuff, so we can use it in our ritual. And it's
Hmm.
like, I mean, yeah, I guess, but
Mm.
like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe the fucking person stuck in a world where physics is a thing is kind of like, no, you can't just claim the moon. Like,
That's what the Americans did. Why can't Kennett do
yeah, 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 they already own it. You're in Canada, Verona. Um,
it?
But yeah, like like because I mean that was one of the things I remember in the opening chapter of Pale, like the prologue. The moon bleeds down onto, and I remember very specifically seeing some like live reads from people who hadn't read Pact, who that was the moment in the story that kind of broke their minds, where they're like, "But the physics, it doesn't make sense," especially if you're coming from like Worm and Ward, where there's like it's sci-fi, but there's still like a kind of emphasis on like specific ways the rules of science get broken. And like for Pale to open with, yeah, the moon is just bleeding locally on this thing in a way that just doesn't make sense with physics. Like
Mm,
for some people, that was almost the introduction to how this world's magic is magical. And like
mm,
not at all scientific. And so like the moon is so important, and like right from the get-go of the story, the moon has been established as something that like can be kind of localized because it bled on the Carmine. And like yeah. So like it's a great choice, but it's also just like fucking hell, Verona. Like yeah.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, it is a good choice. It's just yeah. It's bonkers. Um I think I really like the focus that Lucy brings up specifically on making sure the items are Kennett specific, not Kenneteer specific. Like the
Mm.
first earned dollars is a great example of this. It's not a Kenneteer specific thing, but it's just like it's a great. I mean, it's just nice to see that last week's epilogue with Lucy has kind of had the intended effect, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great call out. I hadn't made that link to last week's, but I think that's a really great point. And yeah, like I do love that. Like this is almost Kennett's epilogue, and maybe we can talk about that later. But like, it is really cool, kind of getting that moment where it's just like this is not about the three of them much at all. They're facilitating a bit, but this is bigger than them, and it's great to see them take extra steps to ensure that that imagery is baked into the ritual.
Mm, yeah, yeah, for sure. But yeah, so Avery figures out most of the items, but just can't get the skull unless surely it's not the skulls of our dead friends, right? Which is very funny, I think. Like it's Verona uses every part of the buffalo, classic. And I'm like poking fun, but it is a good move. Like it's very kind of
Oh yeah.
personal to Kennett move. It's just very funny using the skulls. I mean, I guess it is what the goblins would want, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's also like if you're kind of defining the town through this ritual, which maybe I'll talk more about later, but like you using the skulls of people who died defending it is like really good imagery. Like if you need to symbolize your relationship with death,
Mm,
I think kind of reverentially using these skulls of people who cared about the town enough to die for it is like a really good way to do that. It's sort of like we respect our dead here and stuff like that. You know, especially goblins. Like this has been a whole thing throughout that the story's talked about a lot. But I remember it was like Arc 10 where people like Totoro was holding a goblin funeral, and people were like, "Wow, that's fucking crazy!" Like goblins don't
mm,
care about lives. It's just like making the centerpiece of their relationship of death being like, here are some goblins we cared about is really cool imagery for what Kennet is.
yeah, yeah. Um, it's really nice.
Yeah.
The Kennedys also get a moment to reflect on their lowest point in the fight with Charles and whether they can come back from that, which I think is very interesting. I'm kind of the opinion, and I think we've had this conversation when they were talking in the past about how they should feel about the murder of the family man. Like
Mm.
you you should never feel good about doing a murder, which is effectively what it was for Charles. I mean, asterisk, but
Yeah.
you should never you should have to carry that weight, and that's okay. Like, it's
Yeah.
it, you did good, and that doesn't mean you'll feel good all the time about it, but it's still good.
Yeah, like, definitely, and I think that's been a big thing in both, like, Pale and, like, the Wobbo work before at Ward is this idea of, like, sometimes, yeah, a murder is justified, like, what they did to Charles at the end there was justified, but that also, like, if you're just like, "Yeah, well, I had to, so now I don't feel bad about it," like, that's a shit reaction, like, that you shouldn't just feel okay about doing horrible things because you had to, that's, like, a bad step to take, and I do love this. Yeah, I think it's a good sign that they're healing here. Like this whole interaction where they're talking about child stuff. Like it's one of those big things where the fact they can actually talk about it and they're sort of processing it together almost is the important part, and that gets specifically called out where Avery's like, "Should we be talking about this?" And Lucy's like, "Yeah, yeah, this is we need to talk about this to sort of process it."
Yeah.
And yeah, like I've been learning recently about the concept of acceptance as like therapists use it, which is, the idea of not necessarily having to be okay with something, but being okay with not being okay with it, if that makes sense.
Mm,
Like,
mm,
like that's sort of what the word that jumps to my mind reading this whole thing with Charles is that's like, they're not happy about it, but you can also come to terms with like that you had to do it and it was kind of the right thing.
mm.
um, yeah. I don't know. I really like this sort of moment for sort of, just showing that they're not thrilled about it, but they're healing, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. It's they're talking about it there, you know. They're not ignoring it, which I think is good.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you could probably contrast this directly to like, the stuff that happened after like Bristow and Alexander's deaths where like, Verona was like chundering everywhere and Lucy couldn't look John in the eyes and stuff and like see how much like better they are now.
Mm. Yeah. Um but yeah, so the trio kick off the diagram as Kenneth comes to uh party and hit the streets.
Yeah. And like I do really remember the Christmas chapter was very popular in the fandom, like when that happened. Like I remember that being a really hype point in the story, just like between all of the dog fighting in this story, just having this chapter that was like a fun party. I remember that being really popular with those of us who are reading it live. And this is like a fun, bigger, like 2.0 version of it. And I'm glad Wildbow had time to do something like this in the epilogues because it's just like this is such a cool celebration of the victory, and it's also setting up like the next steps in recovery. It's just fun, and like I felt some tension release from my shoulders when I was reading this chapter, like,
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's really nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um
Oh, and I guess I'm just curious because like it's the sort of thing where if somebody is binge reading this story, I wonder how much the Christmas chapter
mm,
stands out to them because it was I remember it very vividly, and it was kind of big for us at the time, but, like, I wonder if that's one of those things that changes a little bit when you're binging. Um,
yeah.
so, like, yeah, like, this made me kinda curious about, like, how much stuff like that factors into balancing things like this because this was, to my head, Christmas 2.0, but I wonder if you're binge reading it, this chapter would just feel like the end of the, um oh, the shit Star Wars movie. I forget all their titles. You know the one where they beat the Empire and then the ending is just all fireworks shows everywhere?
Mm,
Um, you could kind of see this as that, but it was much more tied into Christmas, to me.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting point, but because Christmas was this, like, last hurrah before things really went to shit,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that was quite interesting. Yeah, I think it's we don't know really what this ritual is at first, and even by the end, we don't really know the specifics of it. But it's still a fun scene. It is just kind of they put on, I don't know, like a big street festival, this big kind of declaration of community saying, "Hey, Kenneth,
Yeah.
come on out. We're here. We're Kenneth. Everyone come check it out." And so Kenneth comes to life, and other people are coming to Kenneth. It's kind of this declaration of, I don't know, victory, I guess.
Yeah, like yeah, it's just such a fun part, and I wanna talk about this part, like, a lot 'cause it's like, I got real like, I don't know if this was Wildbow's intent, but certainly what happened with me is because I was putting a lot of thought into trying to guess the ritual early on, that like seeing it unfold, I was kind of wearing my practitioner hat and like, like I think a lot of the sort of imagery of it that would usually go right over my head kind of landed, and I thought that was really fun. And I want to talk about a lot of it because there's a lot of cool. Like if this had been the last epilogue, I kind of would have got it because it's this great end to Kennett's story in a way. I don't know.
Mm.
It's also just like selfishly for the two of us, Ruben, kind of good because I don't know how much you remember, but we've got like a bunch of awakening ritual themed stuff ready for all packed up too. But the
Yes.
awakening ritual was so long ago. Part of me was worried that some of that might not land. Like, there's a moment here where it gets called out that like the foundlings and the Kennett Below people who are coming out are offering like free meat, free
Mhm.
grilled vegetables, free bread, free sweets, free alcohol, and other drinks. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh my God, that's the 7 things from the awakening ritual. Like, one of the things everyone forgets about from the awakening ritual is you're meant to give like meat, vegetable ash, bread, molasses, like milk,
Mhm.
alcohol, and I've forgotten one. Um, and we've got something really important themed around those things. And I was like, nobody's going to get this. But
Yeah, it's
Wobbo
good
saved
that
the
they've
day.
been reminded. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And like, yeah, I mean that sort of ties into like what is great about this ritual is like to me the awakening ritual is the like character definition ritual. Um, like we saw, like the Kenneteers have used the phrase like level up ritual to refer to domain, familiar, and implement. And so if we go with that kind of video game theming stuff, I feel like the awakening ritual is your character creator ritual. Like the
Mm.
whole point of the ritual is you introduce yourself to the spirits. You use the items to kind of define yourself. I don't know if people remember, but like each of the Kenneteers kind of gave a speech about who they are, why they were awakening, what they wanted to get out of it. And then you also like make offers to the spirits, like kind of saying, "Here's what I have to offer." So it's very much this ritual that's all built around like defining yourself. Um, and for us as readers, that usually happens at the start of the story, which is very fun because for us, we get to be like the spirits where we're seeing these characters define themselves. Like it was great for us as readers getting to read the Awakening Ritual of the Kenneteers because that allowed us to understand them better.
Mm.
Um, but we're sort of doing an awakening ritual for Kennett in this chapter, and that's really different because we also are very attached to Kennett, having spent like
A
six
few years.
bajillion
Yeah.
words. Yeah, like talking about it a lot. And so it's like watching them put together the ritual to define Kennett and its energy to lure people in is really fun because I was like, I'm so invested in Kennett and my image of it that like like it really mattered to me what decision was used. It's like what you were talking about with like it really mattered that they picked the 3 first dollars to sort of define it. So it wasn't about the Kenneteers, it was about Kennett. And so yeah, like seeing that the
Yeah.
markets are established as like a pillar of Kennett was like
Yeah.
cool. And I could probably just go through the entire ritual, talk about each of them, but I won't because that would probably be boring as hell to listen to. But like what's so fun about this is we're essentially seeing the awakening ritual twisted to be about a town, and it's like now they're defining the town magically, and we kind of get to follow that because we're already attached to the town, and that's just like such a fun way to kind of close out a chapter of the story is to sort of like the word bookend gets thrown around a lot here, but it's kind of like it's this is the summary. I mean, it's perfect for an epilogue. It's like here is what Kennett means now,
Mm.
defined in the rules of this world, and they're kind of spreading that out. And like you brought up, it's like it's all about community. Like this, Pale from day one has been going on and on about the benefits of community rather than individualism. And so I love the idea that we're ending with an awakening ritual that's defining a community, not an individual person. Like it's just
Yeah.
there's so many layers on which this is perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay, sorry. I know I said I wouldn't just list out all the little details, but I also did want to call out. I love the little one where Toadslow is very adamant that practitioners aren't involved in his corner. That's about fortune with the coins
Mm.
because he's also working in some aspect to it of like the old ways. And I thought what's really fun is like in Pact and Pale, we've kind of had it established that like the coin or fortune, like the Aurum stuff, is very like new urban industrial sort of stuff, and then like nature and the branch and stuff is very like, as well as being like about like plant life and like the wilderness and stuff, it's also like oldness.
Mm.
And so usually we see people either picking between the new imagery of the coin or the old imagery of the bow. Whereas Toadswallow is doing what he does best, which is kind of merging the two, and he's kind of got the coin, but he's worked some nature stuff into it. And I just love that for him. I love that for Pale. Like that's Pale's whole thing is they're like, hey, we don't need to commit to the new or commit to the old. We're kind of blending the best of both. Like that's what Kennet is. It's great.
Yeah, it's freedom to kind of chase practitionering however you want to, as long as it's, not
and
harmful.
and othering
And
and
othering,
awarening,
yes.
like it's just like
Yes.
chasing anything. They're
Any
like, yeah, we
kind of
don't
being in the magical world, yeah.
we don't believe in limiting paths like that. And
Yeah.
I just like, God, I don't know, there's like 100 things I'd want to say about this. Like I think we've talked a little bit in the last few episodes about how you can kind of map these epilogue chapters to arc 1 a little bit, and like chapter 3 of arc 1 was the Avery chapter, but it was also the like awakening ritual, or I think it was the second half of the awakening ritual.
Mm.
um and so, like, I guess speaking of bookends, I love that we are kind of ending the story with this outro, like awakening ritual. Like, we open the story with the Kennetys sort of awakening themselves, and its mirror image in the epilogues is like Kennet's awakening. And like it's not about an individual anymore, it's about a community. I don't know. I just better shut up now. I'm just going to start making the same points over and over again. I just love everything about this.
Yeah. Um yes.
I love I do love Liz is here, I guess, to talk about something a little bit different. Like, Liz is obviously helping because this is very tied into her as the city spirit. And she's just really bitchy. Like, I love how she's like, oh, this is costing me. And like Lucy's just like, well, reap what you sow. Like, it's just, well,
Yeah.
like, it just felt like
You're doing your
Liz had
community
that like
service, Liz. Shut up.
yeah, but she just had that, like, I don't know, high school girl whiny energy to her.
Mm.
Like, it's still Liz in there for sure, because she was a bit like, oh, like, I don't want to. Um, and sort of having to be reminded that, like, yeah, actually, you have to do your community service hours. Um,
Mm.
yeah, like, I don't know, she's on board, but she's still Liz.
Yeah.
Um, also, the Kennetys donated their hats to the town's awakening ritual, and I like that is sort of the one bit that's just like undeniably them that is in this ritual, and I thought that was really fun. Like, Verona kind of summarizes it how it's a bit of a sign of character growth from them. Like, the hats were this tacky thing they did when they were little kids, and it's like they've grown beyond them now, but it's like a good way for them to stick a bit of themselves in this.
But the hats are iconic. They can't.
I know,
I don't know. I felt
but that's
sad at
why,
this
like,
bit.
I love because they're she says they're going to kind of be permanently left there, and it's like at their awakening site, and I kind of love this as like that could be
It's like a
the spot,
memorial. Mm.
and it could be where they do future awakenings in the town. Like,
Yeah.
I think it is kind of appropriate that, like, as much as we don't want this to be the ritual for the Kennetys, obviously you'd be an idiot to not say that the awakening of those three was pretty important in Kennet becoming what it is today.
Mm.
And so I like that as a way to weave that imagery in, of just like leaving their hats as props in a space that is important for awakening in the future, because it's like they are the people who defined the pattern for what awakening could mean here.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I do like that as an idea.
Hmm. To take a step back from talking about this ritual before I go on about it for another 45 minutes, I also love this is just talking about this as potentially the epilogue for Kennet as a place. There are so many other fun little character moments. Like, we get a call out for Sig, which kind of caught me off guard. I sort of forgot he existed. Freak and Squeak get a mention. Like, we do kind of go through and get some bits
Yeah.
about like almost everyone.
Everybody's here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the party is popping off, but there are some issues. There's some kind of I'm going to pronounce it
Mimai, I think.
Mimaistai.
Yeah. Let's just call them
So,
very good ideas.
there's some kind of Mai Tai that's on its way, and nobody quite knows what it's going to be. Even worse, the mayor is being a real jerk about this festival.
Yeah, I got. Where do we want to start? Do we want to talk about the very good idea that's approaching, or do we want to talk
We'll
about the
get to that in a
mayor?
bit. Maybe let's start with the mayor. But I do want to kind of first off just say conceptually the idea of, oh, another's coming, we got to figure it out. We don't know if we're going to have to befriend it or fight it. It's like a pure example to me of like, it's Kenneth. It's just Kenneth things. Like, this is just what their life is like, doing rituals, random others that are going to pop by and they have to kind of befriend them maybe or fight them. Like, it's just kind of like, it's just nice. Like, it's a thing for them to
Yeah.
solve, but it's not like, oh, we're in trouble. It's just like, oh, it's just a problem that they're going to deal with. Like, it'll be all fine.
Yeah, there's like a moment where it almost feels like the story, or at least some of the characters in it, want me to be worried about this, but I just like I couldn't. Like I was just like,
Mm,
we'll make friends with it. Like whatever. Come on, guys, this can it. Like you're right. Like this is a great example of that. Like this isn't a chapter that's like, and they lived happily ever after, but it's like the pale equivalent of happy ever after. Like yeah, there's still these little stresses. Like stuff like this is going to come up, but it just doesn't feel like I just don't like. I'm just like I'm not worried. I'm like yeah, whatevs. Like they'll figure
mm,
it out. And like yeah, I think this is our little example because obviously we see the bosses at the end of the chapter, and there's a bit of an indication that like there's going to be a lot of this over the next while in Kenneth's future. Like there's going to be a lot of vetting people, making deals with them, trying to go through this whole process we've seen this town go through 100 times in this story of getting some weirdo and figuring out how to make sure that they're a positive influence in
yeah,
this town.
exactly.
Um,
Exactly
and
right.
they're about to have to go through that 100 times over the next few days, is what it feels like. And I kind of love January March as the example Wildbow chose to show us because, like, as a very good idea, um, she's one of the like toughest to negotiate with, and that's why I love the fact that like the Turtle Queen and Monty are the two who are kind of here because they're the other two like textbook.
Yeah,
Everyone was fucking telling them don't make a deal with the Turtle Queen, like, and like Monty's whole thing is corrupting systems. Like they are on
yeah,
paper fucking terrible community members, but now we love them, and so like having them here to help like be the bridge for January March, it's great.
yeah. Hey, speaking of trying to reform real goobers, the mayor. How funny is this mayor? I mean, like, I can feel for him because if you were the mayor of a small town and then these three kids just sometimes randomly somehow put on these huge events and didn't give you any notice or anything, it would be the most annoying thing ever. But yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. It is very funny.
Yeah, like there's a bit with the like Verona almost is getting a little bit mad at him because the Kennedys just keep being they're like, yo, just take it at
Just go
face
along with
value.
it. Yeah.
And he like Verona's like, oh, he just won't do it. And part of me's like, oh come on, Verona.
Yeah.
Like I think he's kind of fair. Like also, there's the bit where like Lucy's like, "Oh, I did email you as we said I would," and he's like, "Oh, that email didn't make its way to me," and Lucy just shrugs, and I was like,
Yeah, which to
"Okay,
me, they actively prevented the email from
yes,
getting to
right,
like.
yeah." Wait.
So they're clearly kind of fucking with him, and it's like I don't know. I mean, yeah,
Like,
uh,
yeah, I don't know. It's sort of like, oh, he isn't showing them the respect they've earned or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but like he doesn't have the context to know
yes,
that. And like it's the sort of thing, if this mayor was just slimily immediately getting on board and like milking it like they tell him to, it's a bit like I feel like we'd be judging him for like taking advantage of something that he had no part in. So it's this weird thing where like I think the Kennedys don't want him involved.
mm,
They've just kind of already made up their minds. With these three are like, we don't like this guy, and we're gonna actively not involve him, and then yell at him for not being involved.
yeah,
I don't think they're being that fair to him, but also I don't think there's much to like about this guy, so I don't feel super bad about it. But like, I don't know. Like,
yeah,
I'm kind of a little bit on the mayor's side, where it's just like, I don't know. It seems like you guys are intentionally being dicks to him.
yeah.
Um,
I'm on his side up until he is a bit of a jerk. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
It kind of feels like the Kennedys could be doing a little bit more to meet him in the middle and not like actively work around him. Um, but yeah, I mean, whatever. I do think it's funny that like Okay, if Kennett is being set up as an informal school, which we can talk about later when the people are actually arriving, if he's a kind of mayor in this kind of school, that makes him a kind of headmaster. Um,
Ooh.
so he should tread lightly.
Mm. Yeah. Fun idea.
um, I also wanted to call out, like, just while we're talking about the mayor, it is very funny that he specifically calls out that what part of what he doesn't like about this is he's like, the timing doesn't make sense. Like, Christmas makes sense because that's Christmas. Of course, we're going to have a big party. And he's like, the masks remind me of Halloween, but we're not doing Halloween. He's like, what is this? This isn't a real holiday, you guys. And I just have to imagine that, like, in the background, the dust storm of January March approaching doubled in size as she doubled her speed to help come and kill the mayor for saying this.
Yeah.
Like, I only picked that up on a reread, but it's very funny on a reread how the mayor specifically calls out that this isn't a real holiday, you guys.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Verona just started a new fan theory. Oh, sorry, no. Lucy started a new fan theory here, dropping the "What if Sylvia was mayor," which is crazy. I mean, I'm kind of into it, but it doesn't quite fit. But it's also just very fun.
Yeah, Sylvia strikes me more as like the head of, I don't know, admin. Like, I don't know what the actual title is, but you know, the person who like runs the things, but isn't like the
The
God, I'm
COO,
trying to
the
think.
chief of operations.
Yeah, like the Chris from Parks and Rec, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
the guy who isn't actually elected, but is like the person who runs the town. And so like Sylvia works with each mayor as they're elected, but she's technically just part of the institution. Like, and she's
yeah. Like
kind
a
of a bit more behind
vizier.
the scenes.
She's
Yeah.
the Jafar to the Sultan of the mayor.
Yeah, no, like, yeah, why can't I remember Adam Scott's character's name in Parks and Rec? Ben?
Ben
Like,
Wyatt was his
yeah,
name.
Ben Wyatt and Chris. That's the sort of job I see him doing. He's not. Yeah. So Sylvia's a she. Anyway. God, I just found it. The person, like, it was funny because my first thought for who should get this was Booker.
Oh.
Because I like one of the few conversations we've had with Booker in this bloody story is where he was saying he'd rather be a small politician in a place where he can make a difference. Like, he doesn't aspire to be on Canada's federal parliament. He aspires to be like a local politician doing the best he can. And I'm like, that's fucking Kennett to a T. Um, so maybe he's not quite ready yet either, but like, I'd be earmarking Booker as future mayor of Kennett if I was running the bookies there.
Mm, fair enough. That's a fun. That's a
And
fun
he's
fan
got,
theory.
I mean, again, he's got an in with the Kenneteers, which I mean, Sylvia does too. But like,
Yeah.
if we're framing the mayor of Canada as the new headmaster of the BHI, it's important to have an in with the three practitioners, because otherwise, your tenure's going to be short.
Yeah. I mean, don't ask what happened to the last mayor.
Yeah.
Uh, do you think we'll get our next epilogue will be 3 years later, and there'll be a new mayor, and it just won't be mentioned?
Yeah, that would be funny. It's like oh, fucking that Prime Minister Harriet in Doctor Who. I don't know if you remember. The
Mm,
Doctor just got rid of her because he didn't like her, and it just sort of happens in the background.
no, I don't really remember
Um,
that.
oh, well, it was funny. Um, yeah, doesn't she look tired? Tasawwuk gets it. Um, I can't remember her name, but one of her things is that she always introduces herself with her full name, like Harriet something. Anyway,
Mm,
uh, I also wanted to bring up Matthew because, like, speaking of how so many Kennet people get little mentions, Matthew's in this chapter and he doesn't seem to be doing that good, right? Like,
mm, yeah.
he seems the most stressed and kind of warm. Like, if I had to pick anyone from this chapter who I feel like is maybe still early in the process of healing, I'd label Matthew. He's the one who feels like he's doing the worst in this chapter, and I get it. I mean, he's got some shit. He hasn't really been able to process all the shit that happened with Edith yet. Um, but yeah, like, Matthew quickly jumped up my list of people I think we might get more focus on in any remaining epilogues because he's still clearly one of the people doing the worst.
Mm. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, he's had a tough time this
Yeah.
story, right? So, you know.
No, like, I get it. It'd be weird if he was fine. It's just like, I don't know, the way he's talking in this chapter kind of jumps out to you as like, I don't know, he's one of the people who still seems the most like he's living in the wartime still. Like he's the least person who's moved out of it into, yeah, I don't know.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, prediction for next epilogue, maybe.
Yeah. I don't know if you'll get a whole POV or something, but like, I don't know. I kind of feel like we might get at least one more mention of Matthew, because it feels like there's a small loose thread there.
Yeah. But yeah, the mime is Thai, and it arrives, and its name is January March, and which is a great name, and it's the spirit of another holiday after New Year's. And can we talk about this? Because
Wait, sorry. I just want to say I love this. I don't self-identify as a mimized Thai or whatever it is. I self-identify as a very good idea. It's
yeah,
such a great
I mean,
line.
okay, that is a good line. But can we talk about the idea that apparently there's enough people who think about the fact that there should be another holiday after New Year's? Like, that's not, it's a bad idea. I'm sorry, January, but really, like, the new year is a perfect end to the holiday season. But the real problem is there's no good holidays between Easter and Halloween. I don't care about
Yeah.
January, March. I want June, September. I want her to come in and champion a good holiday in between there, because that's what we really need.
I think what's happening here is Wildbow has kind of accidentally provided us an opportunity to talk about our discussion question, because I think our reaction to this is a very Australian thing, because we have like Invasion Day in late January, and I think
Yes.
that's we may not feel this because and then we also have like
Oh, because they
Easter
have
is
fucking 4th of July, don't they?
yeah,
Is that
and
what
but
it
like
is?
our extra one is also Anzac Day is right around Easter. So like for
Yeah.
us here in Australia, it's it's that December till like late April that's absolutely stacked with about 80% of our public
Yeah.
holidays.
Yeah.
And then we have between Easter, like we don't Halloween's obviously not like a holiday here. We have I think
Yes.
Labor Day is like next week.
Yeah.
Um but we effectively have like I think the King's birthday was like June or
Yeah.
July,
Yeah.
but that's like all we have between April. So for us, I'm entirely on your side. It's like if I had to
Mhm.
invent a new holiday,
Yeah.
it's going somewhere
It's in maybe
like in the
July,
second third.
August, maybe September.
Yes, like that is absolutely where we're void of stuff here. But I think
Yeah.
that might be like that's just a cultural difference. Like this is I think
Mm.
if Pale was set in Australia, I absolutely agree that we would have June September because that's when our complete dead patch is. But like we saw this
Mm.
story has like Canada Day, obviously the US has July. It's like yeah,
Can
their
it?
gap is between New Year's and Easter, and it's just not for, like that. That's not the case for us. We're stacked in January. Yeah, so I don't know. I thought that was funny because I had the same response as you. I was like, who the fuck needs another holiday in January? Like, but um, I suppose Canadians do is the answer.
Mm.
This
Hmm.
does. I mean, this does because she talks about how she wants to become bigger than Santa. So obviously, she wants her holiday to become bigger than Christmas, which is, I respect the ambition, but like you're going to run into a problem because down here, it's just not going to pick up the same steam. I don't think.
Hmm. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Um. Well, so okay. Also, we get a reference to January's practitioner who has to leave her kid with her mum so she can chase
Yeah.
after January to obstruct her, which is so funny. Like, it just sounds like this poor harried practitioner who, for
Yeah.
some reason, has gotten lumped in with managing this annoying holiday other. How good is that? That's so fucking funny. I hope we get to meet them.
I know. I love that because I have like I had the exact same image as this person, and like this is one of those like things where Wildbow is just such a good author because we have not seen this woman on screen. She is half a continent away,
Yeah.
and we already have a complete image for who she is, which is just
Yeah.
this poor person who's like it is a really good idea to attach yourself to like a very good idea like this that's growing. I can absolutely see why she's lumped herself into it, but
Mhm.
like these single-minded others like this, like you can tell January March is basically like having another child who can just sprint off to the other side of the continent without warning because she just the way they like I think so much of the characterization of this practitioner happens through just how much of a pain in the ass January March is to deal with. Like she's like the way they're like we've got to keep you out until we can make a deal with you, and she's like, no, that's a bad idea. I love you guys, let me in. I'll turn this shit up to 11. Like just like it must be so hard to get her to change her mind about anything.
Mm.
And then, yeah, having to drop your kid off with your mum so you can drive halfway across the continent because she's just run off to this party in Kennet. It's just like it reminds me of Mrs. Poole or Miss Poole.
Yes, yes.
Like that's the person in the story who is the closest mapping to this unnamed practitioner. Yeah, so
Yeah.
fun.
Oh, good things. Good times. I hope we
Um,
get to meet this practitioner.
yeah, yeah. If not in this story, then in a future one. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's one of the really funny things is I guess I not like I'm not getting into Pact spoilers here, but obviously like I think if you haven't read Pact at this point, you have very little idea of like when or where Pact is set, right? Like
Mm,
whereas compared to here, like it kind of sounds like I can't imagine a world where we have another story in this universe that's set after Pale, and like can it just kind of can't come up overtly to some degree, especially if it's set in Canada again or something, like it's just like you can't not have heard about Kennet if you're in the magical side of this world anymore, is sort of how it feels. Like I'm so curious to see how Kennet is balanced in future Otherverse stories, because clearly we've seen that you can avoid the side of the world that Pact took place in because this story has done it. But I just can't imagine Wildbow being able to write another Otherverse story set in Canada and not have Kennet come up, you know?
mm. Well, because it's so majorly defined itself in this world now, right? Like,
Yeah, like I guess that this interlude, oh, sorry, this epilogue is the time to talk about that because yeah, the point of this epilogue is Kennet literally does an awakening ritual, it defines itself to the world. This epilogue
yes.
is Kennet saying to the world, "This is who we are. Come hang out if you vibe with that." And especially because the Kennet vibe is something Wildbow's just spent 3.5 years training us to really like. It's like, how could
Mm,
you not involve Kennet to some degree? And maybe Lucy, Avery, and Verona will be two big potatoes to deal with whatever happens in future stories or whatever. But like, I can't imagine that like Kennet doesn't come up in some context now. It's so
mm,
big and it's just, as you said, publicly defined itself to the world. It has to be a thing.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. So
Um,
therefore, future Otherverse stories will be set in Australia, which is, of course, the furthest away point from Canada. And we got culture here. We could probably have a story.
culture's a strong word for what we have
Well,
here.
you know.
I think we're too tied into Canada. Like the thing is if you travel around Australia, there's Canadians everywhere, and I'm pretty sure if you go to Canada, there's Australians everywhere. Like we're too,
Mm, mm.
because they're just icy Australia in a lot of
Yes,
ways. Is the
yes.
problem. Um, like you could almost like England would almost probably be better, or like just go to like Scotland or something.
Yeah, but I want
Like
the Otherverse story set in Australia. I just
I
think
mean,
that
me
would be
too.
good.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we need to convince Wildbow to come live down here for a couple of months so that he
yeah,
feels qualified to do that.
yeah, that would be good.
Um, but yeah, just take a step back because this is technically a Verona epilogue. We should talk about Verona for a little bit. Because the chapter kind of ends with this moment with her and Otis's buses, and he's dropping off all these people, and
Mm,
Verona has this moment that is like a fun closure to a big part of her arc, and it is also weirdly kind of brilliant in tying up like Mal's side of things. Because do you remember, like, towards the end of Mal's interlude, Mal had that moment where she was like, "Oh, I didn't join the war at the Blue Heron here for shits and giggles. It's because I actually really care about Kennet." And it was like a big moment in the interlude where Mal was actually able to admit to herself that, like, she fucking loved Kennet. It was her home, and she was here because she really felt the need to fight for it.
yeah,
Um, and Verona kind of has a fun related realization as a part of putting together this ritual where she's like, at first she wanted to define Kennet Below by like artsy stuff. She wanted it to be this like underground art cult.
mm,
Um, and that didn't really pick up any steam with anyone else. And it's because she kind of had to go back to the drawing board. Now she's realized what she loved about Kennet Below wasn't actually that it gave her freedom to do cool art shit, but like it was a home for her. Like she was a person who was not fitting in to society and was falling through the cracks. And she fell into Kennet Below and managed to find a home and find friends there. And that's what was really special about Kennet Below. And that's what she wants to be able to give to other people. And it feels like something we've talked about a lot in this podcast with like, the Kenneteers being what they needed at the start of the story. What Verona
Yeah.
needed was somewhere where outcasts could fit in, and that's what she's
Yes.
turning Kennet
Yes.
Below into a healthier version of.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, I don't know, it's so good. Like, and like that art stuff. I'm sure that'll happen. Like, I'm sure there are. I think she says there's some homeless teenagers there, so maybe there's a homeless teenager who wants to spread their wings as some sort of artist or
Mm.
something. And maybe like Mal, they're going to be shit at art, but they'll try. Or
Mm.
like we'll see. Like I don't maybe like that sounds like a fun character to introduce to someone like Verona as a homeless teen who loves art or something. Like there's the potential for that to happen, but like the point is, as long as it's a place where weirdos can find a home, that's what Verona is truly invested in, and that's so perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um.
A place where weirdos can find a home.
Yeah. Like that was a big part of Verona's arc.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I just yeah. I love this for as much as I like. I kind of get annoyed when people talk about like that trope of like the place is a character. Like I hate when it's like oh, New York is really a character in Sex and the City or whatever. Like
Yeah.
or Serenity is a character in Firefly. Like that stuff often annoys me, but like definitely Kennet as an idea as well as a place is very much not a character in Pale, but like a core idea. Like Pale is sorry, Kennet as a concept, like the idea of community has been so deeply woven into this story, and this epilogue does kind of feel like it's as much Kennet's epilogue as it is Verona's. And
Mm.
I think that makes sense because a huge part of Verona's story has been finding a place that is home for her. And Kennet has become that place. And so, like, of course, this is the epilogue where she's helping to define that for everyone else. She's spreading what that is. So it's like this perfect marriage of a Verona epilogue with just kind of an epilogue for Kennet as an idea. Um,
Mm.
like I think that's yeah. I really sort of like how it is both of those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and then we also get a brief glimpse into Kennet's fucking Montessori approach to schooling at the end, where they're not going to be a structured school. It's just like come and learn from other people. It's very like we're not doing book learning at this Kennet. We do street learning.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the school of hard knocks. You learn on the street here in Canada.
Yeah, it's just the option is one of those streets to be Kennet found, which is not like Hard Knocks doesn't apply to Kennet found streets, but it's still street learning. It's just
Mm.
those streets are like where everyone's sitting around reading books.
Yeah.
But if you want to go to the School of Hard Knocks, Kennet Below is still there.
Yeah, true. Well, yeah, I mean, that's the end of the chapter. And to be honest, when I was reading this one for the first time, I kind of thought this might be the final epilogue.
Yeah,
We've got that next epilogue button there, so unless we're being pranked,
it wouldn't
there's
be the
more
first
coming.
time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it would be the first time that Wobbo's done it this way, where he's made us think there's more to the story and there isn't.
It
But
would
like,
be so cruel.
um, but yeah, it wouldn't be the first time that we got the ending point of the story wrong. But yeah, no, I completely agree. Like the closure that you get from this chapter of like,
Yeah.
I mean, God, I feel like I'm just repeating myself, but it feels like I'm not expressing the power of the thoughts and emotions that this chapter invoked with my words today. Because there's so much good closure and definition of Kennet in this Kennet epilogue, and it also does Verona stuff. And like this could have been the end, and I would have been like satisfied.
Yeah.
But it looks like we've maybe got some more coming, and I can't wait to get more satisfied.
Yeah. Yeah. But yes, so but that's not the end of that's not the end of the story, Elliot, and it's also not the end of our podcast because we got some predictions that we got to pull out. Predictions made by the community. I've
So you say that we've both pulled Reddit comments,
no,
haven't we?
mine's from the Pale Predictor form.
Oh shit, it is. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Ignore me.
Uh, my prediction is from Uncle Thermoscales, who's predicting what the fourth epilogue is going to be. That the fourth epilogue will follow with Lucy and Avery. They're going to kind of jump forward. Avery's going to show off some improvements to Thunder Bay. Lucy's going to show off more improvements to Kennet. Yeah. But Uncle Thermoscales, the part I want to focus on for this one was that Uncle Thermoscales is predicting that next epilogue is going to be the final epilogue. And I love a prediction that's so immediately we're easily able to check, are they going to be right or
Yeah.
are they going to be wrong? So we'll find out in a few days, Uncle Thermoscales. I'm very excited.
Yeah, no, you're right. I love that. We've got like 3 or 4 days to find out if Uncle Thermoscales is exactly on the money or not. Um, I love how Uncle Thermoscales is pitching some different ideas as to kind of what the system is for the epilogues, because that's definitely
Mm,
something like I'm seeing lots of ties to Arc One in these epilogues, like, but I don't necessarily have an idea of like. So far, if Walbo has a system that's like, oh, each epilogue represents X as part of a set Y.
yeah.
I have not been able to pick up on it yet. And especially, I think the one that throws me is that first epilogue being half Avery and half Verona has made it really hard to be like, oh, we're just going through the characters or something. It's kind of been completely thrown sideways by the first one. So it's been really fun. But I appreciate Uncle Thermoscales trying to do the same thing as me, which see if there's like a pattern or a model that Wildbow is basing the epilogues off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It'll be fun. Yeah, well, I guess we'll see if Uncle Thermoscales is proven correct.
Yeah, yeah. So we're seeing, yeah, like a lot of people in chat right now are talking about like, are they based on the 4 judges, which
Mm,
is fun. Because I've seen a lot of predictions that like the Sable would get an epilogue.
mm,
Um, so yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but hopefully it'll be something. If there is a pattern, I mean, it also could just be that Wildbow's not limiting himself quite that much. I don't know, but if there is a pattern, hopefully we'll be able to figure it out by the end when we get there.
yeah.
Um, I put out a comment from the Reddit thread by Ghostly Bird, who talks about some of the cherry pop stuff we saw, which is something we have not talked about in this episode, but obviously one
Mm,
of the greatest little through lines in this chapter is cherry pop, Luna Hair, and Snowdrop as the kind of dingus trio um, in the background, giving us a lot of those good character vibes, and they're just funny. And Ghostly Bird is actually calling out that they think Cherry Pop might be heading towards this point where she's defining her own like little rule of discourse where like because she's wrong all the time, like she keeps engaging with everything Snowdrop says as if she's true, and like Luna brings up like Luna's starting to lose her mind where she's like Cherry Pop has to be doing this on purpose. Um and it is just like Ghostly Bird is pointing out that like maybe Cherry Pop isn't doing it on purpose necessarily, but is getting to the point where she's forming her own rule of discourse that is maybe modeled a little bit off Snowdrops, where like Cherry Pop is allowed to be wrong and doesn't quite get gainsaid in the same way. Um, and the Ghostly Bird specifically points out that it's kind of sweet that it's like her friendship with Snowdrop that is maybe allowing Cherry Pop to define this weird rule of discourse. Um, and yeah, I mean, Kennet is definitely the place for her to be where they're weakening the seal. Because if you're trying to define yourself a rule of discourse that is untrue like that, Kennet's the only place where you're going to get any traction on that, I think. But I just love this idea that like Cherry being wrong all the time is going to start to become a thing that is actually part of her. That's just great.
It is quite a funny idea. Yeah, I really like it. Well, yeah, thanks everyone for leaving your predictions or your comments that we spoke about.
Yeah.
Uh,
Obviously, you can continue leaving predictions in that Power Predictor sheet. I don't know how many more people have got, but submit a prediction if you've got one.
yeah. Um, Now, people also left answers to our discussion question, which we had posted about last week. That discussion question was, what are some fun details that would be different if Pale was set where you live or have lived, if you want to pick somewhere else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we got a few fun answers to this. I thought, yeah, again, I just thought it was so funny that January March got introduced in this chapter after we asked this question, and just like almost was immediately providing Australians another angle to answer this question because I was just like, yeah, what are you talking about? January's stacked.
Yeah. Um, so, well, first of all, a few people didn't name their towns, which made me sad because I really enjoyed hearing about these towns and trying to figure out like where in the world I thought they were or whatever. I I'm sad
I
that
mean, I
some
get
people
why
didn't
people
leave it.
didn't want to dox themselves, but
Yeah,
yeah.
come on, cowards, dox yourselves.
But yeah, I don't. Yeah. No, I get it, but yeah, you're right. Like there were definitely a few where I was like trying to deduce where these people lived just because I wanted the context.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess to just start jumping into them,
yeah.
we got an answer from Sengachi, who lives in a small mountain town that basically is just like almost everyone in town is employed by this single large employer, which is something I only thought happened in movies. I didn't realize this was still a thing that happened. Um, like I just thought that was the setup for many a crime novel.
Mm,
But anyway, um, basically, Singachi's talking about how there's no way that wouldn't warp like the magical side of this town. Like, if you had a city spirit, it would be a city spirit that is heavily tied to the point where maybe it's partially merged with the spirit of this big international company. So you'd have this weird spirit that is simultaneously the spirit of a global economic force while also this like small town's spirit.
mm. I th- the idea of a small town that where the town is also named after this big company that presumably founded this town, it's just so interesting. Like
Yeah.
conceptually, the identity of the spirit that would reside in this town. I think it's a really great response.
Mm. I, didn't we kind of touch on something in this realm in the Pact RPG one shot that you did for All Packed Up?
Mm,
Or have I completely misremembered? Like, not
oh, did
nothing
we?
like because we didn't know about city spirits and stuff back then, but like
Mm,
I felt like we dealt with Broken Hill, which was a
mm,
mining town.
yeah,
When it was first
yeah.
started. Anyway, but yeah, no, yeah, that was cool. I really loved how Sengachi was talking about how when they're trying to picture the magical side to this town, they imagine something like Wondercand having a big office there, but then also the rest of it is kind of this magical ghost town with just like some ghouls and goblins, but
Mm,
like kind of devoid of the others that give a town life.
mm,
Um, and I thought that was perfect because I definitely picture Wondercand as the like Samsungs or whatever of the magical world. So they're exactly the kind of place that would like have a big base, and then just because of the way it works, it means the rest of the town is kind of devoid of life because the town is really centered around the company, not the other way around.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I think it's a really interesting. I mean, this was one where it's like, I wonder what this town is. It sounds like it would be so interesting to hear about the history of it.
I'm just like, yeah, again, it's blowing my mind that this is still a thing that exists where you have towns that are kind of
Yeah,
defined by one company. Like, I thought
yeah.
that would only happened in the oldie
Ye
times. Like,
olden days when you got, scrip for your work.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Or I guess I don't assume this town is that bad, but like, like you hear a lot about like miners in Australia, like some of those fly in,
Mm,
fly out workers, and they talk about how like that is a bit of a thing for them where they'll talk about they pay those miners like $200,000 a year
yes.
or whatever. Um but like for most of the shifts that they're on, because it's so remote, they basically have to live in the company's setup, and the company has a bar or whatever, so you can or a pub, so you can get beer, but beer costs like $30 a schooner or something. So it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, they pay you $200,000, but like the only way you can socialize is by going to this pub where they absolutely milk all that money back from you by charging you a fortune for food and drink.
Mm.
Um, and like I've been hearing about that since I was like 18, and friends started going to work at those places, and I was like, how is that legal? Like that's so shitty. Um,
Yeah.
and like I like the town, the idea of living in a town where the company effectively owns the town is just so scary to me. I don't trust companies.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Um,
It's yeah, worrying.
um, I guess moving on to the next answer, we got an answer from Flower Priest, and I wanted to call out their first sentence because they quote unquote humble brag that their hometown is one of the most active drug trafficking spots in the world.
Mhm. Yeah, great
And
brag.
brag is not the word I would have used for that, but I mean, I guess it
Hmm.
depends on the drug.
No
Like,
hate to Flower Priest, but there's some real rough stuff that sounds like it's going
yeah,
on in this town.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Like one of the first things they specifically called out is they don't think the Carmine Judge would be the target in the version of Pale set in their town because there's so much conflict that they think the Carmine would be too strong. Um, like they also specifically call out that lots of places already kind of resemble Kennet below, so there's just a lot of Carmine energy already in the region. So you might have to target another judge because if there's a Carmine there, they're probably pretty safe. Which yeah, I mean, or even if they're not safe, like it's probably a very competitive spot because there's a lot of Carmine flavored others.
Mm,
Whereas what we saw a lot in Pale was that there aren't really any good candidates for the Carmine anyway. I mean, there was one and he lost. Um, so yeah, I don't know, like maybe yeah, or maybe the Carmine here would be like the Alabaster in Pale, where it's like the Carmine shouldn't have had a long life here in this violent place, but weirdly they have.
mm,
Anyway, I don't know.
yeah.
Um, they also specifically called out that there's like a lot of local fairy folklore, but their fairy stuff, like from the native people, there is much more about like the very trickstery, animally stuff. So it's less on like the beauty and nobility, like that elfish sort of stuff. So, like Guillerme might have been dark summer as opposed to high summer
Mm,
because like dark summer fits more with the local fairy lore, that sort of thing.
mm, yeah. Yeah. It's sounds like a very interesting place.
Yeah. They did say that they've worked with kids around the Kenneteers' age as like
Yes.
like helping out with after school stuff, and they specifically called out that they could see three kids like the Kenneteers rising out of this
Really
place
coming
because
out of here, yeah.
there are a lot of really bright and like good children that they've worked with, so they could absolutely see Miss being able to find three brilliant kids there, which was probably the nice part of their answer.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Um but yes, so Sweet Manzana talks about Bogota, the capital of Colombia, where they live. There was a lot of interesting details in here. I guess there aren't that many big canines, so the Carmine might be feline instead. Um, I thought it was really funny. They mentioned that the local word for opossums, chucha, is the same as the word for body odor. So it would be quite a
Yeah.
fun little running joke that Snowdrop would almost certainly have,
Yes.
which I just thought was a
Yeah.
really fun detail.
Yeah, I feel like there'd be more emphasis on the fact that Snowdrop fucking stinks or something
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the Pagoda version
Very
of Pale.
funny.
Yeah.
Very funny.
I thought it was interesting. They brought up that like there was a lot of focus in Sweet Manzanos on like how the animals might change. Um, and they specifically called out that they're a deer and they're a cat, so like Verona and Avery would be fine to keep their masks because it's very similar imagery. But they pointed out that like while there are foxes down there,
Mm,
um, the word for female foxes, which I guess would be vixen in English,
mm.
um, is like the equivalent of the word bitch in English. So they're like, it would be weird for Lucy, like, or there'd be implications for Lucy taking a fox mask just because it's associated with the equivalent word for bitch
It kind of
in the local
feels like
language.
it's along Lucy's vibe, though, of like taking this defiant stance about her identity as she's awakening. Like it feels like something she
Uh,
would kind of do. Oh, maybe not to this
yeah,
extent, but yeah.
no, yeah, I agree. There's an aspect of Lucy which is definitely like anti putting up with bullshit like that or kind of trying to own it, but also at times that's been her worst thing. Like I think Sweet Manzana specifically called out like bitch from Worm as like somebody who kind of tries to own it.
Mm.
Um, and I don't. That's not quite Lucy's vibe. Like it's close, and she could probably like make it work if she was forced to. But I don't think Lucy's the sort of person who specifically looks to challenge people like that. Like, if anything, I think if somebody was going to take the bitch animal, it'd be Verona.
Yeah, true.
Specifically because she wanted to fuck with expectations. But yeah,
Mm.
um, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there were some other great details in here. Like, there's been a lot of civil wars down there apparently, so probably lots of dogs of war hanging around.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and then normal non-eldritch guy is from Brisbane, which is a great city here in
Boo.
Australia that I've never been to, and I'm never gonna go to it.
I've s- I've spent like a day in Brisbane.
Yep.
It was awful. Never. No, I mean, I don't know. Queensland is our Florida, so I guess this is
Yes.
our equivalent of Brisbane is our Miami, I guess.
Yes.
So
Yes.
take with that what you will, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can
I
see
mean
that.
Brisbane as a city when you're there is kind of defined by the Brisbane River.
Hmm.
So normal non-Eldritch guy did talk a lot about how like there would be a major river spirit associated with the city, and that tracks. Like they share a name. I think when you're there, the river kind of defines how you get around. Like
Yeah,
it's like Sydney Harbour. Yeah,
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, it's a big city. Brisbane is a pretty big city here in Australia.
Hmm.
Quite an interesting. I mean, we kind of already talked about a bit about Australian practitionering, but I really think Australia as quite a strong multicultural like melting pot. Although I don't know about Brisbane specifically, would be a good place to set a story like this. Like there'd be a lot of different influences on the practice that you could explore.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it in the past. That gets tricky with like how there's like a standing thing from Indigenous Australians not to use their like you know beliefs and stuff in
Mm,
fantasy stories.
yes.
Um, so that's why it gets tricky to do Australian themed practice stuff because I just wouldn't feel right about completely excluding that, but also I don't feel right about including it.
Yes.
Um, so that's like normal non-Eldritch guy specifically calls out that like in Brisbane you've got this mix of like people of European descent with Asian descent, and then also like obviously the indigenous people, and so like that could be a good basis for like the trio of protagonists or whatever. Um, for like Pale set in Brisbane, and I sort of completely agree with that line of thought. Again, it just becomes the issue for me of like including indigenous stuff is unfortunately like just so difficult. Yeah.
Mm, mm,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I don't know. There's so much cool stuff you could do with Australian practice, but it's just like too difficult to touch. It's a shame.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Bummer. But still, Brisbane, fun place to set a Otherverse story, I reckon.
Yeah, definitely.
um,
This is going to be Walbo's thing. Like when he finally gets like the fame he deserves, and it's like he's on contract, so that to be like the publishers are like we need another Otherverse story in 12 months,
yeah,
and Walbo will be in the position to be like, well, I've got to set this one in Brisbane, so in order to write it properly, you need to pay for me to live there for a year.
yeah, and
Um,
Wildbow would choose to be paid to live in Brisbane, not
Well,
somewhere
okay,
much more
that's just the
exciting.
example we're talking about. Like,
Sure,
obviously, he
sure.
could change it. He could go anywhere he
Not
wants.
like
Like, he could
Europe
choose
or
Easter Island.
Hawaii or no, it's
Yeah,
going to be
yeah, exactly.
fucking Brisbane.
Look, I don't.
Psychotic.
Yeah, I mean Cairns. Like, if you're gonna pick Australia, set the story in Cairns. But like, I don't know. This is the thing, right? It's because like because this world is so tied into the culture of where the stories are set. I get why
Yeah,
Wildbow set this one in Canada, but it's like okay, now everyone needs to fund him moving somewhere really exciting for the next one, so
yeah,
he can spend a year there.
yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, thank you everyone for leaving your uh, answers to our discussion question. We've got a new discussion question this week, Elliot. Do you want to tell the folks about it?
Yeah, sure. Our discussion question is, what's your favorite Otherverse meme?
Whoa.
Um, you can answer that in the discussion thread, which is linked to the show notes below, or hell, you could just cut out the middleman and follow the other link in the notes to doofmedia.com/contribute, where you can submit it via a Google form.
Wow. Good on you. But yeah, no, I mean, no, post it in your, post it in the discussion thread and we'll check it out. And yeah, I think we can we include packed memes in this?
We might have to make that a separate category.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, like submit packed ones and we'll sort them
Why don't
out.
you submit a packed meme and a pale meme? I reckon.
And pate and poke,
Yeah,
one for each.
one for each. I think that's fair. Yeah, cool. But yeah, so you can find the links mentioned in the show notes down below.
Yes, you can also go to the Doof Media website, doofmedia.com. That's obviously where all the links to the All Packed Up 2 stuff is, so you can find out ways you can help us out,
Yep.
find out all the other information about it, like etc. etc.
Yep, that's all at duffmedia.com/APU2 if you want to check it out. Hey, if you're looking for best memes, by the way, you might want to stop by our X, where we post a fresh new tweet, X, every single day, a fresh new meme. So check it out.
just did you see the rumor that Elon might start
Yes,
charging
yes, I
every user
saw.
for Twitter? And I was like, honestly, fucking do it so we can all get out.
I
Like,
know,
you know what I mean?
right? Finally kill
Like,
this fucking thing.
like one of because the issue at the moment is there's like 5 alternatives, and I don't know which one we're meant to go to or
Mm,
whatever. And I figure that that's the push the community would need to fucking
to
pick one.
finally pick. Yeah,
Um,
I'm on Blue Sky,
yeah,
so I'm going for that one.
yeah. I just like whatever. I'm a follower. I don't join social media until far too
Until
late. It's
it's
like
gonna die. Yeah,
yeah. So just like yeah, Elon, fucking do it so we can all escape the hellhole that you've created for everyone.
yeah,
Um, I think the last thing the world needs is me being involved in an OnlyFans. I don't think anybody wants that.
yeah.
Um, anyway, if you do, if you do want to give us money, and I promise I won't send you nudes, head to patreon.com/doof media.
Mm-hmm.
We give you bonus episodes of my voice, but luckily not the rest of my body.
Yeah. And hey, while you're on Patreon, why not check out patreon.com/wildbow? That's where you can support Wildbow for this amazing story as we reach the end of it. As a little thanks to Wildbow, why don't you go and give him some moolah, give him some
Yeah,
coin.
yeah, help him. This might be the first dollar he gets, and then he'll hang it up on his wall. That's how it works with Patreon that has been active for years.
Mm, yeah. Um, Thanks for joining us, folks. I guess, Elliot, do you want to hit us with that classic sign off that we get
Shit.
every week?
I forgot to pick one. Wait, do we want a gross one or like a sappy
A
one?
sappy one.
Sappy, okay. Uh, hey there, baby. I've got this locket of glamour and no one to share it with. So why don't you come with me and tonight can be whatever we want?
Oh, yeah. Okay.